afternoon. I'd like to call together, call to order the Vallecitos Water District workshop on the budget. Oh, we don't take roll or anything.
Nope.
You don't typically with the workshop.
Perfect.
You want to.
Nobody's here anyway. If anyone has oral
What, do you
communication.
chop liver out there? Oh, boy.
No, I meant on the roll call.
Okay, thank you.
None of us are. No oral communication, so we will hand this over to
And
Dennis
I'm going
hand
to
it
say
John.
thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom. He's just got a couple things to walk you through, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. We had sent out a while ago some of the items that came up from last time to kind of, and John's going to incorporate that in his presentation today, some of the items that were discussed at the last budget workshop. And also, we handed out, just for your information, we had our rating presentations on the 12th, I think it was, and we got our ratings back. So Fitch reaffirmed their AA+, which is wonderful. And then we actually had an upgrade from S&P from a AA to a AA+. Because of, yeah, that's great news. And because of the new SEC rules, I'm not sure how much we can discuss this, before the bonds are actually sold. So, but we'll talk about it more on June 3rd, when we have the item for the bonds. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John to get into the actual budget.
Well,
He's
I'd
got a
like to congratulate the
presentation.
district on that, and I was gonna ask, did you have something to say, Director Martin?
I just had a question. Does that mean AAA is out of the question this year? We're waiting for next year?
AAA? Yeah.
Okay.
Might be next year, maybe,
We subliminally said it, but
maybe Christmas.
Okay.
For Christmas? Okay. While John's coming forward, I'm hoping that we can keep this a tight meeting, and I'd like to ask that we kind of write our questions down as we go along and wait till John has finished the presentation, and then we'll go back, and hopefully all our questions will be answered before we get to the end. If that's okay with you, John?
That's okay.
That's okay?
Absolutely. Okay. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is our second budget workshop for fiscal year 15-16. And I'd like to start the presentation by going over the handouts that were given to you at the last board meeting last Wednesday, and we'll walk through those. The second part of the presentation is to compare the preliminary draft budget, which you received in April, with the proposed budget that you received last week. And then the last part of the presentation is to compare the proposed budget with last year's adopted budget. So we compare budget to budget. At the last budget workshop, the question was raised as far as if we were going to increase.
I'm sorry. Do we have a copy of what was passed out to us at the last meeting?
I believe we have a copy when it was passed out.
that's what you have. It's just
This-
more refined.
Oh, that's what this is? This is what was
Yeah,
passed out
It's
the last meeting?
incorporated in there.
It's incorporated into this.
This is what you got
I want
last.
to make sure I had it in front of me.
Sorry, this is what you had last time. It's just smaller in this graph right now.
Thank you very
Sorry.
much. Thank you.
All right, so last time the question was raised, if we were going to increase revenues by $10,000, by $100,000, by $1 million, what's the impact? So we really kept it simple, and we said, okay, in March, we billed 21,334 meters. So if we call those meters customers, and we just divide one by the other, we get the impact per year. So we'd be looking at to raise revenues by an additional $10,000. The impact per that meter is 47 cents per year. If you divide that by 12, it's 4 cents per month. And then it goes all the way from $10,000 up to $1 million, with the high amount per month is $3.91 per meter. We also looked at it and we said, okay, we have a meter, but we have multiple people in the meters, in the homes that have the meters. So if we did it per capita, and we were looking at a population area of about 97,000, and we basically did the same thing. What is it per person that's in our service area? And $10,000 results in a 1 penny increase per month, $1 million increase in revenue, is about 86 cents per month, or $10.31 per year. Last time, we were looking at the salaries and benefits, and the question was raised, when we look at projected 14-15, which is where we're estimating it ending this current fiscal year, and we compare it to what was in the preliminary draft budget for 15-16, and we looked at the variances between those two, why was there the big variance? And the variance was $1.7 million. So to explain that change between the projected and the budget is, and we have an increase in new employees coming in. We have existing employees, and then we have the increase in the benefits. PERS now charges us a flat amount per year, along with the rate that we pay per the amount of payroll, each payroll. The rate itself went down, but that flat amount came on. The net of those two is about $300,000. We're anticipating an increase in group insurance. If it happens, it's in the budget. If it doesn't happen, obviously we won't pay the insurance company for an increase that's not there. And then just overall other workers' compensation insurance and other miscellaneous taxes, we're looking at about $100,000, and that's the difference between what we're projecting to end this year and what we're looking for authorization on for the 15-16 budget. Another question that was raised was the increase in information technology, their budget from year to year. And when we started looking at this, we said, okay, where are we spending the money in information technology? How is it broken down? Because you see a big number, and it really represents a lot of different things. So if we look at 14 and 15 and 15 and 16 side by side in each of those pie charts, we broke it up into where the money is spent. The largest slice of each pie in each year is the labor cost. In 15-16, there's another person being added to that department. But if we look at the outside services, and the mouse here is on the outside services for 14-15 is 7%. When we go to 15-16, that goes up to 19%. And that's a lot of the nature of that department. They go into an expansion phase where they're adding new technology and they bring in outside services to help get us established. And then once it's established, we maintain it from there on. So the outside services will shrink in some years, expand in other years. If you look at the rest of the slices of the pie, for the most part, they stay the same. I also, just for fun, decided, well, what if we didn't add the new position? What would it look like? The outside services still expands, and the cost of labor itself actually only decreases a little bit, about 3%. So the increase that we were looking at from budget to budget was $522,000 for information technology as a whole, for both water and wastewater. To explain that $522,000 is broken up into different components. There's the new position, which with the salary and the benefits comes out to about $91,000 a year. Existing employees, about $62,000 per year. The big question that's asked is, well, how many people are in that department? Well, currently there's 4. There would be 5 with this, and then there's also other people who are allocated to that department, such as Dennis, Tom, Rondi, and other people whose salaries go into IT as part of overhead. The outside services, that increase in outside services, that slice of the pie, the 2 big parts of that are dashboard, which we want to get online this year, the coming fiscal year. And the $100,000 is kind of a placeholder. We don't have a commitment for that $100,000 yet. It's just a placeholder to say, okay, this is what we have to spend, and obviously we're going to try to keep it below that. SCADA support and upgrade is coming on this year too. That's about $90,000. So when we take the cost of labor and just those 2, the dashboard and the SCADA upgrade, we're looking at 2/3 of the increase right there in those 3 items. The rest of it that comes along, like the fiber cabling, that's to bring fiber into the building. We have fiber out to the street, and then we have telephone lines, and then we have fiber in the building. So once we get fiber to the building, our networks will run a lot quicker. And also, IT encompasses all the communications with all of our field personnel, all the iPads that are out in the field, also a dish communication between here and Meadowlark Treatment Plant. And it also works as emergency backup. In case something happens here, we've got that as backup storage. License fees. License fees, they continue to increase every year. We do have a new one, that's the T4 Spatial for collections. And then just the other licenses, the ShoreTel phones, the AutoCAD and ArcGIS, and just the server licenses themselves. Those are the changes in the license fees.
Those like, sorry, I know you wanted us to
I
wait, but,
would, but, okay.
so these changes are above and beyond what we spent last year on licenses, on the same licenses?
Some of them are the same licenses, some are new, because of new software that we're
What's an
adding.
example of one that we had last year?
An example one that we had last year is the VMware licenses and support. That's the
Do you know
virtual
off the top of your head
machines.
what it was last year? That seems like quite a jump for software license.
I don't have it with me, but I do have it, that's how we counted them, yeah. We can get it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could just make a comment about the format. I appreciate that you wind the format that way. I'm just going to tell you that we're going to go back to page 1 when it comes to my questions and start all over again. So I apologize, but I have many, many questions to ask, and I will keep them all to the end, but I'm just bringing up your format.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I believe it was Director Elefart that asked for a view of our capital improvement budget over the last several years and what did it, historically, what did it look like? Broke that down into 4 components because that capital budget page really is made up of 4 components. There's projects that are continuing, we call them carryover projects, and there's additional requests associated with those projects. They're in progress, and there's changes in the bid environment, there's various changes, and the project will need a little bit more money, or sometimes we decrease it to continue going forward. There are new projects. Those are the new projects looking out forward. And then Encina is always a new project, but it goes out for 5 years since they've given us their capital improvement program. And then last year, in 14-15, we added those future projects for planning purposes. So what we did was this is what you saw last time in the April 29th board workshop. So this is the history of it, and then on the right-hand side is the history without the future projects. So you can see the future projects jumped up so much in 15-16. And if you look at 08-09, which is this column right here, it kind of tells the story of how they work. We get the new requests in. The following year, the additional requests, because the project's now rolling along, goes into bid. The next year after that, it kind of decreases a bit because those new requests from 2 years ago are getting finished, might need a little bit more, and there's a few more new requests. And then if you look at 11-12, we're finishing projects, then we get to 12-13, bam, we get this big bump up in new projects again. And that's just kind of the life cycle of how the CIP works. I also added the comparison between the preliminary draft budget that we had back in April and the proposed budget. I figured this was a good time to show you the differences in what changed between that preliminary draft and the proposed budget that you have. If you look at the graphs on the lower left-hand quadrant there, the future projects have decreased significantly. And then on the right hand,
On this one then? Not on that one?
on this one here.
On that one? Which we don't have a printed copy, it's just up here.
Yeah, it's just on the screen. What happened with those and for the changes is basically just took another look at the CIP, looked at the master plan, and we have another master plan, as you're well aware, that's going to be coming out soon. And then we said, okay, what projects that are in here can we defer until we get that new master plan in place? Those projects were to eliminate a $300,000 additional request. and also to postpone some new and future projects that we had in there. The Tres Amigos water line was $6.2 million, expansion of the locker room was $465,000, a couple valve replacements, and then the El Norte Parkway water line, which was almost $13 million in the future projects. That's why that purple line dropped so much. All said and done, it's almost $20 million of decreases into the CIP from the preliminary draft budget that you had and the proposed. And we'll look at that a little bit more too as we go on. The next slide we had in the last presentation also, and that's where we had the 9.9% that we were talking about. And the question came up, and staff was asked to do different scenarios. What if we did 3%? What if we did 3.5%? What about 5%, 6%? So that's what we'll walk through now is a couple of different scenarios. We did 6 scenarios in total. There's 3 of them that we'll go through. The first one is at 3.5%. And we're looking at the same thing for each of these slides. So they're all laid out the same. I'm just going to walk you through the first one, and then we'll go through the next couple. The current rates are over on the left. That's where we are right now. And when we say the rates, we're talking about all 3 components of the rates. We're talking about the consumption, the amount per unit that we charge, the ready to serve, the flat amount per meter that we charge, and then the wastewater sewer component that we charge, which is also a flat amount. So what we have right now is if we take a 5/8 inch meter at 14 units per month, the average bill is about $112.78. That's where we are right now. If we talk about a 3.5% increase across all 3 of those rates, that's combined, 3.5% increase across all 3 of those rates, you can see that the dollar increase, we start at the bottom, goes to $3.95 from year to year. But if we look up at the consumption number, and you see the red $3.28, that's the tier 2 rate. That rate actually goes down because the way our ordinance is every meter gets the first 5 units at our cost. The Water Authority increased that cost from $14.15 to $15.16 by 74 cents. So if we were going to go at 3.5%, we'd actually decrease the amount that we're charging for tier 2, which means that we're picking up more than the pass-through. We're picking up more than the 74 cents pass-through. Table number 2 is the same, laid out with a 5% increase. And again, we are looking at tier 2 going down from $3.66 a unit to $3.47 per unit. The place where it stays constant is at a 6.5%. And that's 6.5% across all 3 of those rates. The ready-to-serve rate was already adopted in October 2013. So that rate is already built in. The sewer rate was already adopted, again, in October 2013. So those rates don't change. The only thing that's moving up and down is that consumption rate. But the 6.5 is above the entire, is all 3 rates combined. So if we look at it this way, we can see, all right, we're going to hold that steady, and we're going to use the rates that have already been adopted. But what does that look like to our customer? What if we look at a customer's bill and we break down each of the components that we're charging the customer for? We'll just take a quick look. The first 5 units, as we said, this is this first line above the top here. In 14-15, it's $2.62 per unit. We're passing that through to our customer at cost. It's going up to $3.36 per unit, and we pass that through on those first 5 units. You can see that the Water Authority rate goes from $13.10 to $16.80. The next 9 units, if we hold tier 2 steady at the $3.66 per unit, in 14-15, it was $9.36 was our retail portion, Vallecitos' retail portion. That portion actually goes down to $2.70. If you look back at 14-15 at the Water Authority, it's $23.58. If you look over to 15-16 for the Water Authority, it actually goes up to $30.24. And as I said, the ready-to-serve and the sewer rates have already been adopted, so those are the adopted rates included in there. If we go straight down in this column here, in the Vallecitos column, you see that the Vallecitos portion goes from $63.85 to $60.11, a decrease of $3.74, while the Water Authority and Metropolitans actually goes up $11.11. The net of those two is the $7.37, or 6.5% between years.
Now, at that point, before you go further, I do think we're gonna get some questions.
That's fine.
So, Director Martin.
Oh. All right. My first question is, your revenue increase impact, could we also, just by reversing those numbers, call that a revenue decrease impact? So if we wanted to decrease someone's bill, we could apply those same numbers and it would be adversely the same.
If we, if we stayed by that amount, we'd have to reduce expenses, out of the budget.
Right, but that gives us the amount. That tells me that we have to reduce expenses by X amount to get the cost down. Am I correct?
To bring the cost
That can work
down.
either direction.
To bring the cost down.
Salaries and benefits. Not to pick on anybody, but we have a large salary going out this year. Is that reflected in here?
Yes. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No, I'm just curious about how that works, because you're showing we have new employees coming in. I don't really see where old employees are retiring, and there is some cost savings to that. Assumptive that those places have already been filled last year, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, you're 100% right. There's, for instance, we had an employee retired just recently, and they were in the preliminary draft budget because we had built them in. They announced their retirement, they're retired, and now that position has been filled with someone at a lower level. So when we got to the proposed budget, we actually decreased the amount of salaries.
Okay. Do we have someone retiring in the near future that we're not replacing? They've already been replaced?
Yes,
Is that reflected?
yes.
It is. Okay. Interesting.
In other words, you're as up to date as you can possibly be with the information you have. Thank you.
That's, yes.
Anyone else?
Well, if
Yes, Director
Dr. Martin, if Director Martin is done or take.
Oh, he was not
getting
done.
his-
Oh, I have a lot more, but I want to wait
Okay.
for someone else to go through.
All right, I have a question.
Yes, Director.
I'm, in doing my math, particularly on that IT, if I heard you correctly, we have 4 staff members that are, must be part-time or something, because they're only 61,900 is their expense?
That's the increase.
That's the increase? And then we're adding one, and that's 140% more, so help me to understand. Maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture there.
That's the full salary and benefits of that employee for a year. Whereas
Okay.
the other.
The other is just an
60 is
increase
just
above their salary, and their salary is somewhere else. Okay, very good. And I don't know if you're gonna get to this, because maybe the rest of the presentation, but one of the things that we talked about last time, are we able to put a number on that we need to lower our expenses by X thousands of dollars to reduce the increase by some percentage? Do we have that number anywhere
To reduce the increase in
in the water bill that we're talking about?
In the water rate.
I mean, if it was 0.1% for every $100,000 or $10,000, then in my simplistic mind, I would say, okay, well, either have to find expenses to reduce, or I gotta figure out that I'm gonna use some of our reserve to reduce that 0.1%. But do we have that number at our fingertips?
The same as
Yeah.
You have it
the
in
same as the other
dollars.
one, the slide you put up before about the 100,000. Did that answer your question about 40 cents for every
Yeah,
$100,000?
it's in
Oh,
dollars
so it's
instead
40
of
cents for every
percentage.
100,000?
Yeah,
For every-
either direction. You look at it either way.
Either direction, and 40 cents, well, I need to go back to that.
That's a month, on a monthly bill.
Yeah, but then looking at
Get back to that
table
slide.
1,
Thank you.
the, this one here.
I just found that out.
So if I, we're looking at table 1 and we're at 3.5%, if I wanted to, you said every percent, 40 cents?
No, this is absolute dollars. He's got a slide coming up later
Oh,
that'll address that.
I'll wait till then.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for that. Did you have something? I think-
Yeah, if I can stop choking and I can breathe, I'll ask my question. Maybe I misunderstood what we were trying to ask you to do, John, at the last meeting, was my understanding was when we asked you to give us a couple different scenarios, if we only raised the budget by 3.5%, how would that change things? It was more about expenses. Did you look at that or not?
He's got that coming up.
It's
on
coming.
another slide.
Okay,
I'm gonna speak
then I
this up.
think, oh, you'll be right back. Would you like us to wait? or no? Director Martin, do you have any questions that you?
IT, do you have a breakdown that we have right here as to what that department cost us?
In total? In total? Is
Can you tell us what page, John?
sure, on, that's, let me get both pages.
That's wastewater.
So, on page 14,
And 24.
page 14 and page 24,
One's for water.
one's water, one's food.
One's what?
One is-
One's a water division and one's a sewer division, IT is split among the two. So you have, for 15-16, you're looking at 902,000 for the water, and for the wastewater, for 15-16 is 700,000. So 1.602.
1.6 million?
Yes.
But I'm trying to follow.
Okay.
On 14, where's it at in the,
If you go up to
General
information,
administration?
information
No.
technology.
Information
The second category, the second,
The
information
second
oh,
technology.
here we go, that's the big letters.
Yeah,
Down this column,
Okay,
there's,
yeah, right.
they're probably too big for you to.
902,000
for water.
Correct.
for water and 700 for, if we went back to oatmeal and string, we'd save a lot.
It'd only be $1 million.
That answer your question?
So 1.6 million is what it cost us in the next budget, or what you're assuming is gonna cost us, assuming you're hiring a new employee?
Yes.
You're assuming all these costs. Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can follow my notes. Which are-
Yeah.
You're gonna have to move up on these, what we have in front of us, because I don't have notes on what we have in front of us.
Okay.
And I got it, this is one I wanted to question. Keep going, I'm sorry, keep going, that's fine. Fine. That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. Right there, sorry. Back
That one.
Right there. Okay. Postpone new future prospects. Trace Amigos water line replacement for 6.2 million. What is that? And when will we gonna be replacing it?
And, Jim.
James?
Gumpel.
Good afternoon, Director Martin. That's the Trace Amigos line. It's the line that actually connects we have a pump station over by our 40 and 33 million gallon tank. And we pump into the hills up in Vista and over almost into the Gopher Canyon area. There's one single pipeline, and And general manager then, I don't remember how old that pipeline is.
55.
How,
1955.
1955 pipeline, that's a steel line. So that line is actually scheduled in the future to be replaced, but there's no budget for it in the immediate next few years. And most of that money was going to be planned for 2020, 2021, as far as those parts. But actually, all those future projects, most of them expenditures were around 2019, 2020.
Okay, when we last did the budget, we didn't have these things in there, because we're only looking out 5 years out, and we added these because we're 10 years out. Am I somewhat on the right page?
They were all included in the proposed budget in that future project category,
Right.
which was quite large compared to the previous year's budget, which is the current fiscal year, the 2014-15 budget.
Right.
They weren't in the 2014-15 budget.
So we attempted to extend that number. For what reason? Is that normal practice in the industry, or why was it a different number last time we did a budget, or a different length of time than this year's length of time?
Basically, at the beginning of every budget cycle, we look at the master plan projects, and every year, new projects come up as far as future consideration. So if we're planning on, within the 5-year cycle, spending $1 on it, then we put a sheet together for it. And so it came up within this next 5-year cycle to start looking at to spend money on it for each one of those projects.
So you were talking 2016 to 2021?
No, at the end of the
That 5 year.
yeah, at the end of the 5-year cycle, starting with next fiscal year, which is 15-16. So
Okay.
If, Director Martin, if you go to page 35 of your budget.
Yep.
Okay, you'll see halfway down the page after the first highlighted numbers, it starts with number 78 on the far right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the one below it's supposed to be 79. We found the typo as we were going through this. But if you go to the left on that first line item at 15 million,
Right.
200 something, that's a new project that we put in this year. Okay, that's because Encina gave us a 5-year projection of capital. So that's why you see this in here. So what you see is for 5 years out, we've got a $3 million expenditure every year estimated. That's assuming Encina gets $3 million worth of capital done this year. They might get $1.7 million. That means next year might be 5. They might get 2 million, the next year might be 6. So if you look at the next two down, 1.9 and 1.7, again, you can see the expenditures are pushed out over a 5-year period. They're not all here right now. And again, the reason we do that is we just want to project what rates may do in 5 years, because as John goes through a few more slides here, and this goes to what Director Hernandez's question is, 10 cents now on rates, what you have to look at is just not the rate today. You got to look at what it does to reserves and what it does to your. That's why there's about 12 more slides that show what you do today has a significant impact in 2 years. So what they did was they just have these 3 projects. It's the oldest pipe. The second oldest pipe in the district is the main pipe that comes from Escondido all the way across. And then you had the other 2 that were some of the projects that I asked staff, okay, what can you pull out of here? It doesn't impact the rates. It just moves expenses out. So we're going to bring it back to you in a couple of years. But what we'll do is the very first item where it says 300,000, where'd that go?
Asset management?
I can't read that far. I'm sorry, the microphone was
Asset management
in the way.
replacements,
$300,000 asset management plan is, we're getting to the 50-year life on a lot of facilities, and the asset management plan is going to give the board the direction over the next 30 years, what, where, and when. That's all it is. But that's where all of the reserves go to pay. The reserves are not reserves. Reserves are there to pay the capital. So why they chose them was those were the oldest pipes we have that we want to start moving forward to plan. That's the reason.
Okay, the fourth one on there, the El Norte Parkway water line, I think you were just talking about that. That's the oldest pipe.
That's the oldest pipe.
And that goes from the pump station that we all have seen on the tour in Escondido through El Norte Parkway, comes to us. What water do we actually receive from that?
That's from the San Diego County Water Authority, our number 2 connection.
But number 2 connection?
Mhm.
Okay. Our number 1 connection is,
No, it's just called number 2 connection. It's called number 2.
Okay.
The one in Crosstown's number 5, the one to the far north is number 8.
okay.
Yeah, it's not like it's number 2 on priority.
How much water do we get from that, out of curiosity?
That's the connection that we get a small amount on a normal basis, but every year when the water authority goes through all the shutdowns, that is our lifeline to the aqueduct for all of our water supply.
Okay.
So we get water all the
That won't
time.
be true in the future, because we're gonna have desal.
No,
pumping
we're
in
always
50%.
gonna rely on that. That desal is a little more water, but it's nowhere close to the amount of water we need.
for the 10-day shutdown. Again, just thinking, I thought we had all the storage, 1 million gallons of storage for the 10-day shutdown as well.
No, with the way the district operates is we've always operated on 10 days. That's 10 days during a off period, which is equal to a normal 5 days. But it's always been the equivalent of that at 10 CFS or 12 CFS that we can get through it is the equivalent of about 100 million gallons in storage. So last year, when you saw those great numbers that where we kept storage and we kept storage and kept storage, we're still pulling 20, 30 million gallons, not that much, but we're pulling probably 10 million gallons a day additional from the aqueduct. If the entire aqueduct system shuts down, we will barely make a 10-day period. So we always have one connection on at one time when there's an aqueduct shutdown. So that is a key function to it.
So that key function is generally, the natural hazard once a year when they clean.
No,
the
they use it
pipes.
all year, but we rely 100% on it during the shutdown.
Right.
Yeah.
You use it all year, but it's not necessary all year.
No.
It's just necessary during that shutdown
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
At some point in time, when desal is producing what it should be, will that cause the necessity of that line not to be there any longer?
No,
That's gonna be there forever?
no, I would never, from my standpoint, sitting right here, I would never give up connection to an aqueduct.
Well, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And now the last thing that you went over, I didn't follow at all. Sorry. James, $500,000 bathroom. We're gonna have gold little valves on it and stuff. Give me a break. How many more men do we have working here now than we had working here 20 years ago?
Well, I'll let
I'll have Ed address
I'll
that.
let Ed address that one, but it is also a structural change to the building. So.
Yeah. You don't have enough structure in this building that's empty now.
Yeah, the problem is the existing locker room was built 99?
98.
And we've doubled staff in Orem since then. If you ever want to take a trip over there and you want to see how 40 guys try to cram it, because not all of them try at the same time, into the small space, you'd understand why we have to expand it.
Over where?
In the B building, the operations side.
Oh, it's not even in this building?
No, it's the operations building. We're gonna have to take out part of a wall, and then we're gonna have to do additional tilt-up constructions. We're gonna have to double the size of the locker room in order to accommodate the staff we have now, plus an additional maybe 5 or 6 guys in the future. So it's an expensive project.
Okay.
Ed, how many square feet of an addition is this whole thing?
We're doing about 20 by 40, was it? 20 by 50? Yeah, about 20 by 50, I think was the size of the locker room.
And keep in mind, it's just a budget number.
Yeah, no.
We gotta have a
Right.
number.
We did go out for bids on that, and so it is a
Oh, really?
relatively close cover, yeah. We went out
Really?
and requested quotes from contractors, and so it's a relatively firm number.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any more
Thank you.
questions, Director
Yeah,
Martin?
one, and James, you don't have to come up to that, but you showed number 3, that valve replacement's only 43,000?
Yes.
We know how
That's
valves
James.
have gone up in
That's it.
price.
Yeah, actually, those are 2 projects. One of them was for 20,000, and the other one was for 23,000. These are valves that we normally isolate our reservoirs with completely when we take them out of service. We drain them and we clean them every 3 years.
Which reservoirs?
It's on their Palomar tank and Mountain Bell tank.
Okay.
So Palomar is one right behind Palomar College, and Mountain Bell's over in Vista. So we found during the last cleaning process that they're not holding completely. If we have to rehabilitate the inside, we have to have a completely dry shutdown. So they were scheduled to be replaced, but it's something we can postpone until next year.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much.
Before you
Last
leave,
question?
I'm sorry.
I do have a
Yes,
question.
one more.
Because now, maybe I didn't know the gravity of the $465,000, 40 men stacked into a telephone booth. So,
It's pretty close.
yeah, so this is being taken out of the budget,
Yes.
right?
We're gonna postpone it a year, and operations staff, they
And
say
just
they'll-
hose each other down for a year, is that it?
kind of what we're doing now. There's some of the guys actually get changed in the shop area. We cordoned off an area, but it's not very pleasant.
Oh, hell, then that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Director.
Just to clarify, because I might have missed this when had to step out for a second. These projects that you're postponing, this roughly 19 or $20 million here, this was in our first draft of the budget, and
Correct.
now you've taken this 20 million out of the.
Correct.
Okay. Right.
Would you like to continue, John? And I will ask that we hold our questions till the end.
Well, do ask John about something he's already said.
Oh, you had another question? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't understand that. Okay.
I'm completely lost as soon as you got to page 4. I'm trying to comprehend what you're trying to tell me, and that's my fault, I'm sure. But I guess you're trying to give me wiggle room as to how to explain that it's not really Vallecitos, it's San Diego County Water Authority? Is that what you're getting to here?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean anything to the ratepayer, just so you know, so don't explain it to me.
And we took that into consideration, because when I get my water bill, I don't break it down in its component units. Oh, this coming from that, this coming from that, this coming from that. You know, I get the bill from the person who mails it to me, or the entity that mails it to me. And that's why on here, we wanted to take a look at it and at least be able to show where those charges are coming from. But yeah, for our customers, I don't think.
And if you go to the bottom right-hand side there, that kind of shows it all right there. At 6.5%, we're eating 74% of our Tier 2 water rate. So we're actually eating that. At 3.5%, it's even more than that, and you can see where we have to drop it down. The 6.5% proposed are the pass-through costs of the water authority in that. And you already have a policy of record that pass-through costs are passed through automatically.
Well, my question is, what, I guess really, the opposite of what you're expecting is, why are we eating the water? Because we have to?
That was the way that, when you remember last board, when we were talking about how we had projected how we would offset some of the desal costs. We
Right.
knew we would never have rate stabilization because we don't have enough money coming in. This is what, I don't have the presentation we did from last year, but that's what was presented on how we would
Plan.
offset.
Yeah, that's how it.
That's how it was planned to offset the desal costs. We could eat that in our operating budget. That's what we've been working towards. So that's why we're eating 74 cents.
It would be, without that, it would be, if we're just passing through costs and keeping our rate the same, or just an inflationary increase, it's a 28% increase on our wholesale. So it's to mitigate that 28%.
You'll see another slide that shows how
I
that
hear
came
what you're
about.
saying, but I'm just thinking from a consumer's point of view. They could certainly understand the water rates going up. They don't understand the fixed rates going up.
Mhm. But again, we get a fixed, the water authority does rates the same way as we do, same way as Encina does. We get a cost for capital and we get a cost for flow. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, the water authority
2003.
unbundled and they went from a commodity to a fixed piece and a commodity piece. So that's the way we do our 218 notice every single time. If we have our rate steady, we just show, yeah, they're gonna blame us, we get that. And it's hard to explain that. But it's a pass-through component, which has been the district's policy, is to pass that through. So when we do our 218 notices, when we do everything, we just pass through that cost. So if you look at the right-hand side, at a 6.5% increase across the board, those are coming from Met and the Water Authority. They're not coming from Vallecitos.
But it's not coming from the cost of the commodity.
It's coming from both.
Yeah, the
Commodity
biggest
and
part
fixed.
is the direct desal.
Look at
So
the top right.
Most of it's commodity, the increase, the wholesale increase. The 28% is mostly commodity.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. May we continue?
Certainly.
All right, great. Thank you, John. Nico.
So, in looking at that, and just kind of piggyback on what Dennis was just saying, if we look over time at, this purple line represents that average bill we were just talking about. So this is the percentage increase year to year on that average bill, 5/8 inch meter, 14 units a month. If we overlay what the water authority and Met, the fixed and commodity component that they've passed through to us, we see it spiking way up in this fiscal year that we're talking about, the 15-16 fiscal year. That was anticipated, that was planned, that's part of the desal, that was built in all along. In order to allow that pass through, this is Vallecitos is fixed. So as they go up, we go down to absorb that increase. And our purple line that we started with, that's our average that runs between the two of them. I also threw one more line in there, and that's our sewer component of the average bill. So.
That's where we're trying to explain, Director Martin, that's where this big spike is that, I guess it's green, gold, Green? Green, that's the spike that we're getting from the water authority that we knew in 2016. To accommodate it, there was no way we could have raised the revenue, because you see where we'd be. We would have had a huge spike in our rate increases to get up there. And then our rate would have been a lot higher than we needed to be, and then we bring it back down. We had this conversation last year on the budget of, when we talked about reserves, the comment was, well, why don't we just stay at 75% reserves instead of floating up and down? And you'll see some more graphs on that. To pick a 75% thing, those spikes that you see, the two extremes, we would have those every year. We'd raise 20% one year, we wouldn't spend it all, or they might not raise as much, and then boom. I think last year when we had 1.8, that was what we had projected, but then what the water authority told us we were gonna get, didn't get passed through. So our rate increase was very low. That was because they didn't do what we thought what they would do. So we have an artificial number that we just say, okay, we wanna be at X in our reserves, because keep in mind, everything John's showing you really comes down to the reserve policy. It really does, like Director Hernandez said last time, there's only two places to get it, reserves or no reserves. That's the only choice really for the district. So because of that spike from the water authority this year, this is what we're doing to offset it, to get us back down to a level increase, which is purple, which again is an aggregate and an average of where we think need to be to mitigate it.
Great segue.
Okay,
Because
there it
we're gonna look at reserves next. Now, this one is in dollars. And this takes each of those scenarios that we were asked to do. The top green line is the ceiling of our reserves projecting out over 5 years. The orange, brown line, this one down here, that's the floor, and projecting out over those same 5 years, and that's both water and wastewater reserves. So each of the different scenarios, the 3.5 all the way up to the 12, shows us where we would basically be in 5 years if we chose any one of those different scenarios. In order to get within, I think it was $15–17 million of the ceiling of the reserves, it would be the 12% increase, which is a huge increase. The 6.5 that we were looking at in order to stay even with the Tier 2 rates is going to put us at higher than where we are now, but there's still going to be a gap between the floor, between where we end up in the ceiling. Then if we take that same thought process and look at it as an average of the floor and or actually of the ceiling, and we say, okay, where do we end up? Here's where we start. We're projecting that 15–16. We're at roughly a little more than 70% of our reserve ceiling. We know that the drought is happening. We know that there's going to be extreme conservation. And we'll show you revenue numbers here in a moment. We know that reserves are going to go down, and with each scenario, each of those different scenarios, reserves are going to go down, and then they're going to stabilize at some point, and then as we come out of the drought, they're going to come back up. So the 12% shows us, if we look at the reserve ceiling, we'd be at almost 80% of the reserve ceiling. If we go to the 3.5%, we're at about 57% of the reserve ceiling. And the 6.5, which is in the middle, takes us just above 60%. So then the question becomes, what percentage of the ceiling are we comfortable at having a reserve level in each of those, in those years, or at the end of the 5 years, provided everything comes out as planned?
And if you look at the lower right-hand side, could you explain the red numbers, John?
Yeah, the numbers on the lower right-hand side, those are each of the scenarios, and we call it the Tier 2 retail offset, in kind of a fancy way, for saying how much of the 74 cents that the Water Authority is passing through this year will either increase or decrease the Tier 2 rate. And if you remember back on those tables, the 3.5%, the Tier 2 rate decreased. At 5%, the Tier 2 rate decreased. And at the 6.5, it stayed the same. Tier 2 stayed the same. That's, if you go lower than 6.5%, that's how much more of the 74 cents the district picks up. If you go above the 6.5, that's how much of the 74 cents actually passing through. It's that retail portion of the rate.
Did you have a question?
Yes, and two questions now. And on your table two, just because it's in front of me, you have the $3.47 on the tier two red. That is less than it's costing us.
I'm sorry, where are you looking at, Jim?
This,
on,
this handout on sheet
Yeah,
five,
it's this one.
Five at the
table
top.
two, the $3.47.
Thank you.
That means that we are receiving more than it's costing us for that particular rate. Is that right?
No.
We're actually selling it.
We're selling it for
than
less
it's
than it
costing.
cost us.
Oh, it's selling it for less than it costs us. Yeah, we're receiving,
It costs us $3.66, we're gonna sell it for $3.47.
right. Well, what if we raise that to $3.66?
That's
That's
one.
that's
That's what
number.
6.5 does.
That's 6.5%.
Well, that's where we get to the 6.5%. I
That
see.
keeps us even on that
Ah,
component.
I see, I see. So then, back to the revenue graph that you had with the second one here. So, we're spending our reserves to make up this differential.
Yes.
And that means that if you take the blue line, which is 3.5%, and I'm just using 100 because I can figure that out. If we had $100,000 in our reserve account, we would only be able to have 57,000 to do any repair or any new facilities out of the reserves.
Correct.
Okay. I got that.
Plain in Spain.
But would reducing expenses change that?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So we haven't got to that part yet, right?
Didn't understand the question. The expenses that we talked about already in deferring are already incorporated.
Just those four?
Those
Pardon?
capital
The
projects?
capital projects. What
Those
about-
capital projects
oh.
are included in this.
Whatever we discussed
Yeah.
was incorporated here.
Yeah.
So there's no
Your
more,
alternatives.
there's no more present, you don't have more slides that you, with other scenarios that if we did this or we did without this?
We've gone through and cut everything that we believe, you know, from the district standpoint of running this district and replacement. The capital, keep in mind, the capital, different set of money. It's different fund.
No, I understand
We do
that.
that. So we can go through, and you've got the list of all the items that are in there. So if we go through and the board says, okay, well, let's just cut out this valve replacement, and let's cut out this pipe replacement, what we're doing is we're cutting into operational issues. That's what you're cutting out. So now you're talking about the maintenance and the operation of the district. Your other option, plain and simple, is get rid of staff. Those are your
That's the
choices.
biggest part.
Yeah, those are your choices. We've already cut the big pieces out that we can cut. We've already deferred. And again, keep in mind, this is our fourth cut. I've already gone through the budget 3 times with operations and pushed and cut and moved them out. We're talking replacement of pipes, replacement of valves, SCADA. And if you want, we can come back and walk you through a detailed list. It's in your budget. That's your choice. That is the direct impact to these rates. The other option is get rid of staff. Those are your 2 cuts. Those are your 2 choices.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to continue, John?
Sure. Okay, so now we'll take a look at revisions between the proposed budget that we were given last week and the preliminary draft that you were given back in April. And there's really only 4 major changes. The water revenue, now that we have numbers from San Diego County Water Authority, we're still kind of waiting on those. We built those in, and we also looked at demand. And so the difference between that preliminary draft budget that we had for water revenue and this proposed budget that you have, the difference is a decrease of about $5 million from that budget to this budget. What goes along with that is if we're selling less water, we're purchasing less water, so there's also a decrease in that expense of about $3.7 million, and that's from the preliminary draft to the proposed. The transfer, since we're selling less water, the transfer into the reserve on the water side is also going to go down 1.3. And as we showed before, the capital projects, that's the $20 million that we showed earlier of that itemized list of projects that's going to be deferred.
You thinking? Yes,
Just-
Director Hernandez.
So round numbers, the differential is about $30 million. Right? 5.3, 1.2, 19.8.
No, those are
No.
going different
Yeah,
directions.
they're going different directions.
It's about 21 million.
Yeah.
Oh, at 21 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, John. Thank you.
So now if we just take the proposed budget, now we just, like, we're gonna start fresh. We've got the proposed budget, and we can compare that to last year's 14-15 adopted budget. If we take that proposed budget and we start looking at a couple of the things that are important because of different covenants and things. The first one is our debt service coverage. We have a covenant of 1.15 times. And what we're looking at is, it's actually right here. This is the budget year that we're looking at. Everything to the left is prior history. Everything to the right is what we're projecting. The purple line is all revenues altogether. The blue line says if developers stop developing and capacity fees stop, what does that do to our debt service coverage ratio? Obviously, there's a big gap there. And then if the governor decides, well, let's take some property tax money back, that's what we have with the green line, where there's no capacity fees and no property taxes. We're still, with just operating revenues themselves, we're still above our covenant over the next 5 years, so we're projecting to be in good shape there. Our transfers to reserves, the actual is from 09-10 through 13-14. And in 09-10, we also had another drought where people conserved. They did a lot of conservation, and you see the transfer to the reserve was about $600,000, went up to $900,000, 1.4, and then as we came out of that drought, those went up. The same type of scenario is we're projecting is going to happen again because of the drought that we're in now and the conservation and the reductions. So in 15-16, we're looking at 3.7. 16-17 dropping to 1.1, and then 1.7, 3.2 coming out of this next drought at some point.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Director Martin.
Okay, just explain reserve budget and projection operating transfers. Okay, never mind, got it, thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to look at the proposed budget to the adopted budget, like we said. And so if we're looking year to year, basically if we just focus on that right-hand column, if we go from 14-15 to 15-16, our operating revenues projected to drop by about $5.8 million. That's water and sewer, budget to budget year to year. Our operating expenses coming down about 2.9, the bulk of that being the water purchases. And then our transfers, of course, decrease accordingly. And then the bottom strip there is our capital project budget. And I broke that down into the carryover capital projects. Those are going down by 2.3. And that just means that projects are coming off the list. The current CIP requests going up about 5.7. And then that future, we just started doing that in 14-15. Back then it was 2.6. This fiscal year, after taking out that Tres Amigos and the El Norte, it's now at 9.2. So that future component is going up about 6.6. Now, if we want to look at the fiscal year 15-16 by itself, slice that in half, not exactly in half, into the components of water and wastewater, and we look at those, we have revenues, 35 million for water, 19 for wastewater, expenses 30, let's say 32 for water, and 12 for wastewater. And in total, we're looking at a transfer to reserves of 10.3 between water and wastewater. Looking at the water operating budget, even with the reduction in demand and the cost of water, of purchasing more water, the cost of water and that purchase is still 60% of the water operating budget. And the rest of the slices of the pie stay about the same as they have been in other years, with the exception of the replacement reserve transfer. That's going to go down because of the decrease in revenue. Here is, just looking at it at a very high level, revenues are anticipated to decrease on the water side about $7.1 million. The water purchases about 4.1. Operations, support, and general and administrative increases, which are pretty common to prior years. They're staying about the same. And our transfer to reserves on the water side from 14-15 to 15-16 is going to decrease by about 3.6. When we look at the wastewater, there wasn't really a lot of changes between the preliminary budget that you received and this proposed budget on the wastewater side. Treatment is still a big part of that pie there. Looking at it year to year, the increases are pretty standard for what we've had in wastewater. The trend continues on that side. Salaries and benefits. When we look at 14-15 to 15-16, the salaries themselves are going up by about 50,000 there. The PERS is the big one, that's 320,000, and then the group insurance. And when you look at it, we've been anticipating PERS to do something for a couple of years. That's why the budget numbers were the way they were. And the same thing with the group insurance ever since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And what this does is says that we know something's coming up. We don't know exactly what it is, but the money is there if it's needed. Like I said, if the insurance companies don't bill us for it, we're obviously not going to write them a check. Total salaries and benefits in total $610,000 increase from budget 14-15 to 15-16.
If you go back to that, John, please.
Sure.
Director Martin, to your question, so you see the salary difference from last year to this year, including all the regular step raises, whatever the case may be in there at full salary. That's where it shows that when the gentleman in the red shirt out here is gone, that's where the difference is. It's only $50,000 at face value, last year's salary to this year's salary. And that includes the additional people. So that's where you are seeing the fact that it is in fact less.
What steps and what cost of living goes into that number?
If they're, I don't know what the breakdown is, but if they're due a step raise, it's a 5%, and the cost of living is whatever the cost of living is. This year it was 2.8, 3?
1.3.
1.3.
We're estimating 2.
I think, yeah, I think we're assuming 2, and the contract has a cap on it, so it can't be over a certain amount, so we look at that. But that just goes to your question that we're changing, so the salary last year to this year is almost flush, $50,000 difference.
And your group insurance is going up.
Yes. It's what he said, the Affordable Care Act, we don't know. No, it might not. It might not. It may not go up. Everything
I'm hearing is going
wait
to
till-
go up.
Wait till
Crystal ball.
2000, when's the Cadillac kick in?
Budget has-
Wait till 2018 hits.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the Affordable Care Act. It's,
Well, the Cadillac tax on it
yeah,
is.
but they just, that's how insurance companies control that.
But it's coming.
They raise it.
It's coming.
Pass it through
Yeah.
to us.
So these are assumed increases. If we don't see them, obviously, we don't spend it. The salary is pretty well nailed down. I mean, they do that by employee when they do the breakdown.
These 4 graphs show the 4 biggest components of our budget. Water, and this is in dollars, millions of dollars. And we're looking, actually, for this budget, we're looking at this column right here, the 15-16 column. So you can see that water purchases have gone up, but in this drought, we're anticipating lower demand, so therefore our purchases are going to be lower. When we go over to treatment is somewhat cyclical, just like IT is. There's big improvements and things that go in, and then the rest becomes maintenance over time, and then you replace something, and then maintenance over time, and it goes up and down. Salaries and benefits, we're looking at this 15-16 line. I'm sorry, 15-16 line, which is the increase there. And then the other is basically everything else. Everything else that's included.
Yo, sorry, Director Martin.
So as Dennis said, obviously water purchases is number one, very little control over that. Treatment, no control. Other, very minor control. Salaries and benefits is the only controlling.
Next slide shows what that's doing.
If we look at it as a percentage of the budget, and remember, we're in this column here, the 15, 16, that's a little more than 50% of that. And treatment, we show that this year, we're expecting it to increase, but then it's got that cyclical motion, and the next years, it's gonna decrease here. It'll probably pop up somewhere over here again. just
And
because-
why is that?
It's because of items wear out. Like, we'll put in a new pump, and it might last for a year and a half or 2 years, and then we'll replace the pump, and it's not necessarily a fixed asset, it's more of a piece of equipment, so that's included in the operating budget. Salaries and benefits, if we look here, we got a little increase in here, and a lot of that is from the PERF that we talked about in the health insurance. And then we're projecting it's gonna level off, but for the most part, salaries on this line have stayed relatively constant. And then the other does the same thing. We have things that wear out, get replaced, and those kind of go up and down. Plus electricity costs are high.
Director Martin.
So John, how do you account for, assuming your salaries are pretty level? And 13, 14, well, actually, 12, 13 forward, they look pretty level. And you've lost people and you've added people, but you've added more than you've lost. But the ones that you've added are coming at a much lower rate than the ones you lost.
Yes.
And that's why you're staying at a fairly even
This is a
keel.
percentage of budget, though. It's not,
Right.
this isn't absolute dollars, it's a percentage of the budget.
But that is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But that is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
And again, and that goes
Thank
to,
you,
you've got
Tom.
a lot of people that have been here a long time, so they're at the top end of their salary range. And that's where we're at. And that can make upwards of a 30% difference in their salary range, from the bottom to top.
All right. And then the capital budget, this is basically a repeat of the slide that you saw a little while ago. Just looking over, this is just in millions of dollars. Our total CIP increase, including the future projects, by about $10 million. And then the next steps, as far as the budget process is concerned, is if there's any changes, we would incorporate those from the proposed budget into the recommended budget, distribute that to you by June 12th, and then on the June 17th board meeting, present the recommended budget for adoption.
Okay, Director Hernandez.
I don't know that, I saw it specifically, because the question relative to, and let's just stay with reserves, or monies in general, who cares where it comes from. But in order to reduce that 6.5% where we're even, 1%, or even 1/10%, or any kind of number that I can do in my head, how much do we have to find from anyone?
Dollar amount?
Yeah.
We have to find from anywhere?
I don't know if I understand what you're asking.
Well, the 6.5% we're even.
We're even.
Right.
We're passing through the
Right.
whole water authority. and stuff like
Exactly.
that. Okay.
In order to reduce that a full percent, how much money would we have to find on either our expenses or use in our reserve to accommodate that?
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah,
you can
before-
go to the slide with the graph on
Yeah,
the
go-
reserve one. That's the best way to do it.
We're up on the reserve.
That way, it's reserves.
Oh, I see, because that's what that comes from.
John, can you
John,
go to
just go to the reserve
Go to
slide.
the reserve slide that has the
Yeah, it has those percentages.
percentages, and then it might not be a perfect percent, but we can kind of interpolate.
Yeah, right,
Between
close,
6.5 to, what's the scenario? So 6.5, so 5 is 1.5%.
Oh, wait a
And-
second. we're talking about the lower right-hand corner there?
Lower right-hand corner, there's,
5, yeah,
if you go to 5, and then you look at the line, that's percentage of budget. Can you go to the one that has absolute dollars?
Well, what color is it?
Red.
Do you have a ruler?
Right above the blue.
So
It's this one.
the
here.
5% line?
yeah, it's the
Yeah.
difference between those two lines. So if you look at
Difference
absolute
between-
dollars, it's a $5 million range, so.
But that's way out in 2020. then.
Yeah, that's in
Oh,
2020.
good, if you have the dollar
You
amounts
gotta look at
associated
the
with
other
that.
end of it.
John, why don't you go ahead and go off the sheet there?
Yeah, this is
yeah.
Michael Arthur, he's our financial analyst. He's
See, they
put a lot
did
of
better.
great
Hi, Michael.
information
All right.
together.
Yeah, that's the far east end, that's 5 years out.
So the question is then, is it, because I look out on a 5-year projection is how I
Right.
do it. So do we want to look out in the far right column, or do we want to look at year 1?
Just what's the difference
I'm just
between,
trying to see
I think immediately.
how to get that 6.5 down less and not cost us money.
Sure.
And the only place we can do it is out of our savings, our reserve, or our expenses, reduce that, but let's start with our savings.
From
which-
6.5 to 5% in the first year, it would be about $320,000.
Okay, good. 6.5 to 5, so
Probably a point and a half.
so 1.5 is $300,000. So if this was my savings account, and I want to take $300,000 out of it and give it to the ratepayers, that's who I'd be giving it to, right?
No, you
Uh,
just,
I'm not sure with the 320, I'm looking at the difference in the lines over here. I'm
Looks like
looking
a
at
lot
more like millions. You can-
No. 6.5 to 5.
Oh, this is, okay, I was looking at here.
yeah, we're just looking at the current year, Tom.
Yeah.
Current year.
Yeah, the impacts are down the road.
Yeah, right, well, okay, so, but today, take $300,000 out of my savings account and use that, we only increase to our ratepayers of 5%, and we use $300,000 more from somewhere, whether it's reserve
Go to-
or expenses.
Go through
That-
2 slides.
Two more slides.
Okay, no, go back one.
Back one?
Just go to the little the red one in the bottom right corner. So just pretend you're at the 5%.
5%,
So John, could you, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Just explain what those numbers are. What is it?
Yeah, it's
93 cents.
So instead of 74 cents, we eat 93 cents.
I'm sorry again?
19 cents more,
19 cents.
19 cents more
above and beyond the 74 cents that we're already
Yes.
eating. That's the difference.
that
Per
we would be
unit.
decreasing
Per
the
unit.
rate.
No.
No.
What he's saying is if we
That's not actually
agreed to the 5%
Yeah.
as the budget's presented to us, we would be taking 93 cents per meter?
Per unit.
Pardon?
Average,
Per unit of
single-family
water.
bill, average bill.
Okay, per unit out of like reserves, our
Mhm.
so-called, that's how we'd be stabilizing it.
Okay,
If we
Mhm.
stay
That's
at
on a rate,
the
it's like
650,
we're only doing 74.
we're gonna be taking 74 cents, which keeps us in between our ceiling and the floor policy that we've established for the reserve.
Well, we'd still be in
That's-
between the
well,
two.
You're still in
I'm
between.
just
Just
saying
correct-
that's
that's on a-
it
that's
just
on a per
fluctuates.
unit.
Kind of a.
So if we,
I'm
Yes.
sorry, just to correct myself before we continue. It's just on a per unit, it's 93 cents a unit of water.
A unit,
A
okay.
unit of water,
A
yeah.
unit.
I'm sorry.
that we would have to take out of our reserve.
No, that we reduce our.
Or we wouldn't get
We reduce
to
our
put
rate
into
bill.
our reserve.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
We just take a hit to reserves, basically.
Yeah.
The reserve's good.
Or we find it expensive,
Or we find it an expense,
or a combination of two.
or the two. All right.
And one, sorry if I could, and the budget is based on the 6.5%, but we're not looking at raising rates right now or setting rates right now. We just needed to figure out what revenue would we need in order to cover the expense.
Right, but ultimately, that's what we're gonna have to do.
Yeah, coming up in
Right.
November.
So,
Cost of
you know,
service study.
how painful, how much we're gonna have to discuss with our ratepayers that their bill is gonna go up. Whether it's 3.5 or 12%, somewhere in there is the ultimate number.
Did you have one?
Yeah, so going to that same chart you're using prior to, no, this
The
one,
one
yeah.
before this?
No, this is the right one. 5% 93 cents, 6.5% 74 cents per unit, correct?
Yeah, the red is the per
Average,
unit.
average household is 14 units, so it's $2.66.
That's the tier 2 unit, that's the base rate. So the first 5 units are at wholesale, whatever it is, and then this is the increase or decrease. to the per unit charge.
So that's not the total cost per unit. That's an increase to the unit charge we already charge. Is that what you're saying?
Is the red numbers is what we would absorb, basically. That's our decrease to the tier 2 rate, yeah. That's our decrease to the tier 2 rate. So right now we have $1.04. Right now we charge $1.04 for tier 2.
Right.
So under the 6.5% scenario, we're gonna reduce it from $1.04 to 30 cents. That's what that means. So we'd only be adding 30 cents on a retail. On the 3.5%, we're actually completely wiping out our tier, we're not adding anything.
We have no tier premium whatsoever.
Yeah. It's on the higher tiers, then we have a little bit of premium, but on a base tier, we're $1.12 would completely wipe it out. And then some, yeah, it's
Okay.
below cost, yeah.
But you're comfortable with the 6.5?
Yeah, we're even.
We planned to use reserves to make that come
And the
down.
6.5 is using reserves?
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
How much?
Absolutely.
How much? Give me a total dollar amount.
Go to the next slide go to the back one for dollars.
If you compare the 12 to the, compare the 12 to the 6.5, it's gonna be the closest to say how much we're using.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The reason why we use the 12 is, Tom was saying that it's $1.04 is the retail portion that we pass on. I assume that the 12% is assuming that we still pass on that $1.04. So that's why we use that as that ceiling one. It wasn't just to recommend a rate. But the difference between if we were to pass on the full $1.04 versus the 6.5, and give me a second, because I hit that age, sorry. It's about $1.2 million, $1.1 million we're hitting in reserves
Which
in
year?
the first year.
In the first year, and then there's reserves every year, obviously, if it
Correct.
has
At
an
the
impact.
end of 5
every year.
years, because I like to look 5 years out, we're talking $14 million at the end of 5 years.
It's a huge hit. It's a huge hit.
That's why those lines.
That's why the lines diverge so quickly, is when again, all I can tell you is we look 5. If you're looking at 1, and then next year, we'll look at 1, and next year we'll look at 1, you're gonna see your reserves plummet. They're gonna-
And then sooner or later.
The
you're
expenses are gonna go through the
jump.
ceiling,
Yes.
and you're gonna have to jump.
Yeah, then
That's why we're just showing the alternatives of what it could be. And again, just to understand, this is a revenue requirement. I went through, Director Snella, out of the projects I have in here, if you want to look at ones that we really could push off, little blue lines behind your head, the audio visual, it's $500,000. Cut it. I can cut that right now if you
Hey,
want.
that's a gallon of paint to paint those
Yeah,
stripes.
and that's some very upset IT people because we're 20 years behind in technology. We're keeping this system working on a shoestring. I mean, literally.
What system?
Yeah, that's what I mean. We're keeping it working on a shoestring.
Yeah, that's all we need.
Some would think.
We have questions right now regarding, not so much comments, but questions.
I have a statement.
A statement.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to see if we have any questions for John. And then if we're gonna do statements, maybe John wants to sit down so it doesn't feel like we're making them at John. And we'll just do some generic statement making. A question.
Yes, question. The last meeting, you gave us the shock number of 10%, and now you've moved it down to 6.5. So we have one more step to make, obviously. But the shock one was like,
Is that a
Everybody does
statement
that.
or a question?
thank you. No, I was asking, I didn't know if it was 6.5%. Just making sure.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, if you would like to step away so you'll feel more comfortable.
Do you want to water, Director Sneller?
No,
Should I come up there?
peanut stuck in
And if you
Oh.
don't mind, I would like a 3-minute break to run to the ladies' room, and then we'll come back for statements.
Okay.
So going back to what you were just saying, I'm trying to figure out now. Okay, so we have $500,000 in audiovisual.
Is that all replacement?
audio visual is probably all replacement.
That's probably all
Yeah, it's all replacement.
That's replacement.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not growth,
So
so.
why can't we just, instead of spending that, do the bathroom? That's $500,000.
Tell me.
Because it costs nothing to do, is what you're telling me. It doesn't change the budget one iota. That's what you just said, explain to me, because the money doesn't.
No, capital does. Capital doesn't change the budget, but if you've got a $400,000 here and you tell me to switch it, it's still $400,000, I don't care. Now, like, again, there's IT stuff that we need to do, we're just not gonna do it. It's easy, I'll push it off to next year. If you wanna do the bathrooms instead, do the bathrooms.
Well, it would seem to me from an
Wait.
operations standpoint, the bathrooms are more important than adding a few IT and an extra person to handle the IT.
No, I'm
I'd
talking
rather see us-
talking the audio visual upgrade, that's a separate
The
$500,000.
audiovisual, we're fine, in my opinion.
Well-
Okay, thank you, that's, did you have something to say about your hand up?
Just to clarify, if we swapped the audio-visual portion that we were talking about, the upgrade, for the locker room, would have no effect on rates.
Correct.
Or if we, have we already taken out the locker, if we take out the audio-visual, no effect on rates.
Oh, it will have an effect on rates. Yeah, it's a $500,000 cut.
Oh, okay, well then that was the point.
Yeah.
That was what we were asking.
Yeah, so.
No, you were saying do that instead of the audiovisual.
No, prior to that
Originally.
conversation.
Yeah.
So if we
originally.
took out the audio-visual
Wait,
at
wait,
five, I'm just trying to be
I
clear.
know you are, just slow down, and then we'll give you the floor, so you can just
Okay.
talk.
If we take out $500,000 out of the audio-visual, and based on our real thumbnail, we would lower the percentage of increase to the rates by a point and a half. At maybe 2, at 1 point for every 300,000.
You have to look, again, you can't look in a vacuum at 1 year, it's the impact. If we lower it 1% to cover that 500,000 now, we might have to be raising it 2%, you know, depending on what we have left to cut in the next year. So, yeah, we don't look at them in a vacuum.
We've got to look at income equity.
Like Mike had said, it was 14 million when you look over 5 years.
Would you look at that then? Because that's, I mean, that's $500,000, a lot of money. So, could you look at that and, I mean, if I'm 1.5, 1.75%? And yeah, you're right, if we had to do something.
Spread it out, it's very
and
small.
Spread it
Yeah,
out,
very
well, if you
small.
spread it out, maybe it's only a 0.5 point for the next
Exactly.
3 years, but still, it's a piece.
Yeah.
Before I come to you, Director Ellingthorpe, did you have anything to say?
No, basically all my questions have been answered or asked by everybody else.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if I could, when we walk away here, if, with the chair's indulgence, excuse me, we do need to get a concurrence of direction that we're being asked to move forward on from the board, because I am coming back next time with the recommended budget.
Yeah.
We can have time to get stuff to you in between, but you're gonna see the Encina budget on the 3rd, and then you got the next budget on the 17th. So, I mean, our window is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I do want to get concurrence from the board as a majority that this is what you want me to look at.
I'm sure my colleagues will be able to.
I'll miss you. All right, Director Martin, thank you for waiting.
So I'm understanding that the only thing that makes a long-term cut hang in there is cutting employees.
Yep.
Because other than that, it's short-term, 1 year,
Yes.
2 year.
Yeah.
But it's the number of employees you have to cut in order to make a big change in that budget.
Ones that have
And have that, have the
decrease each
same
year.
line.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I could, on that note, you've got the 3 employees in there. One is the engineering tech, 3. That is only budgeted for 6 months of the year because we don't know what the drought impact's gonna be. I won't hire that plan check person unless we do, but the bulk of the plan checkers is paid for by the developers. So that's kind of a revenue neutral as far as the district goes. What was the other 2 positions? IT and the facility maintenance. So there's your 2. If I had to defer an employee another year, I'd defer the facility maintenance, if that's the board's direction. That one we could do.
Yes, Director Martin?
The cost of service fees that we increased, I thought greatly last year,
No.
that didn't really mean very much to us, did it?
Again, we didn't raise rates, we reallocated.
Right. but
There
the
were some
bottom
that
line
went
is still
up, but it's
budgetary.
in the scheme, and again, in, not to look at it lightly, but when you look at the magnitude of the budget, if we're knocking out $1 million and $2 million projects, you'll see a significant difference. You probably saw $20,000 or $30,000 in revenue difference on those fees. What we have found is what John's done with you may recall some of the comments back when we first started. He left now, so I can pick on him. He didn't like when the bill came due, that would be Director Hernandez. So we modified, not because of him, but what we did is we went back to the board and said, okay, who's that hitting? So we modified the rates, and John can clarify, put words in his mouth, nobody would get hit with a bill due on a weekend or on a Monday. So it took a huge percentage of those locks and unlocks right off the table. So it completely changed. And then we changed our billing process to where they only came due 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So it greatly changed the number of people that we were having that problem with. But in the scheme of things, budget-wise, it's not even a blip in the overall revenue. It's like the lease fees you asked about last time, might be $30,000. We just got an upgrade, they're sending us $50,000, $15,000 for the last lease for a year, but $15,000 in a year in this budget is interest in a day. It's not that much to make changes. If you did want to look at the staffing, because you are correct, the staffing is the longest term expense. The others are short, they're short term. The maintenance person, again, if we want to push that off, we could. What we were looking at there was actually, that would probably be a net savings to us by outsourcing some of it versus keeping some of it. But we could push that one out. The one that if we had to keep an employee, I would say the computer programmer, the analyst. The engineering one, honestly, didn't think we'd fill it this year. I don't know what the drought's gonna do to the economy as far as more growth. But again, that's paid for by the development community, not the ratepayer. So I don't know how much impact that would have.
Yes, Doug?
Do you have any rough estimate, if you curtailed just those two, what that brings it down to?
We'll look and tell you. We can get that to you.
Director Snell, do you have anything?
Yeah, and I know that we all know all this, but I don't have a lot of experience with water agencies, but I do have a lot of experience in corporate world and, of course, doing my own household finances. And when there's not enough top-line revenue in either one of those scenarios, something has to give. And I know that Director or General Manager Lamb, you said that I've gotten rid of everything, but I don't that you could, or you looked at everything. But I don't feel comfortable that I can go to our customers and say, we're gonna levy a 6.5%, a 9%, even a 5% increase on them, unless I can also look at them and tell them and with good conscience that we really truly went through this line by line, just like I would do in the corporate world, to really look at a need to have versus a want to have analysis. I wrote down outsourcing some services. You just brought that up. I don't know how in depth we've looked at that as a board or as an agency of how far we can go with that, outsourcing different services to potentially save money. But we know that a lot of these costs are going up, and they're going to continue to go up. They're uncontrollable. The water, the benefits, the medical, but we can't just simply pass that all on to our customers. We have to look at ways to reduce the outgoing money as well. And so, none of us as policymakers, we shouldn't be sitting here going line by line saying, I know we're trying to help because we're problem solvers, right? But we're saying, oh yeah, well, what can do without the IT equipment? Because in large part we asked for that, right? So we probably feel more comfortable saying that, well, we could probably live without that. I'm even leaning now towards, and this is something that I was pushing on with regards to the public outreach. Maybe we shouldn't be putting so much money and resources into public outreach because we don't have the money to do so without burdening significantly our customers. So, but you're here 5 days a week, full-time, and we're not, so nobody knows better about the operations here than you. I think from a board standpoint, if we can come up with a percentage that we all agree upon, for you to come back and say, let's say we just hypothetically come up with 3.5% of an increase, what can you do? Worst case scenario, you might have to make decisions that you don't want to make, but what can you do to get us to that point? And how is that going to impact customer service, or potentially, but we may have to look at those things. And it may be a combination, again, for you to get to that point of laying off employees, possibly, cutting services, possibly, or getting into reserves. And I would imagine if it was 3.5%, you would probably have to you'd have to pull from all three pots. And that's something that I think that we need to consider, because if we're going to pass on 6.5%, 9%, or even 5% to our customers, boy, we sure need to be able to tell them that we did everything we possibly can, and we looked at every expense before we did that, and we cut as much as possible.
If I might on that.
Yes.
We have done that. And you are correct that the person with most experience has already gone through it 2 or 3 times, like I did indicate. And I think you can, as a board, look any one of your ratepayers square in the eye. We are eating 74 cents and lowering our commodity rate. We're doing that. If you saw the labor, we're flat. The other increases you're gonna have no matter what. You may pick up 3.5%, 5% a year in just expenses on materials. So if you're gonna look at that, and then the concept is to offset that, not raise rates and get rid of staff and diminish services, I'll tell you right now, we already run on the lean side of every department from a staffing standpoint. We showed you that back when we did the staffing study 2 years ago. We have, in fact, kept our component even this year. So that's kind of the bottom line here, is the amount that you saw from that slide going through. These are pass-throughs from another agency. Historically, I will tell you, there used to be a theory, a couple of theories: don't raise rates in an election year. That was always a great one to me. And the other one was, don't raise rates, we have to control it. Let's eat the revenue that other agencies need. I can't control MET, I can't control the Water Authority, neither can you. Director Evans is on it, but they're a different animal. That would be like yesterday, Craig and Director Elthorpe, and Director Hernandez voting against the Encina budget to say, we don't want you to do that. When you're in the water and wastewater industry, I understand the difference between you and your corporate world. I've got about 1% flexibility in anywhere. I've got 0 tolerance in wastewater. There is none. None. I mean, there is no tolerance for wastewater issues. The reason that our rates are still the second low, third lowest in the county, keep that in mind when you're making this decision, is because we are frugal. We have looked at this every which way we can. Honestly, this list was a lot larger when it started 4 months ago with O&M. I've cut it back substantially. I think at the 6.5%, that does show your ratepayers that you have held the district's cost flat. We're absorbing 74%. We're knocking that tier 2 rate down from $1.04 to 30 cents. You are doing it. You're absorbing it. You're eating into your reserves. I'll just caution the board, if there's a theory of, well, let's not do any more than X% because that just sounds good. From a public policy standpoint, I can tell you in about 3 years, you're going to be looking at rate increases in the double digits. We don't know what's going to happen. That's why we look at a 5-year projection, what we think is going to happen, and then we bring it to you every year. It's why you set rates every year. It's what the 218 notice is for. I will go back here again and I'll cut. But I'm telling you, you're getting to the point now of just starting to cut operational issues, which is the reason we don't have fines, the reason we've never been fined by the state, the reason we don't have any of these issues, the reason we're well thought of by all of our regulatory agencies. We don't have a problem. You get a reaffirmation of that from the financial world by getting the Fitch and the S&P rating. Everything that's being done is reasonable and prudent, plus part of what they look like is the flexibility to raise rates if needed. I understand you don't want to. I get that, and if the direction from the board is to, okay, come back with the 5%, tell us how to do it, then that's what I'll do. But I will tell you that you're starting to defer maintenance projects, and you're starting to lose a labor force. Those are your 2 choices.
Yeah, I understand that.
All right, did you say you would like to speak? Director
Yes,
Oliphant?
yeah, and that kind of what you were just talking about leads into my question. On the 6 scenarios, the tables 1 through 6 on the various percentage rates, for the outlined 4 years after the proposed budget, you've got percentages.
Did you,
Mhm.
sweetie?
Well, yeah,
Oh.
it was-
He'll pull it up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
not all the handouts have it. but-
I don't think I have it either.
Yeah, the second page printed out with the printing over the graph.
Yeah, this was the original handout
Yeah.
from last week.
Oh.
so, yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, John, pull it back up.
Is this the one, Director Oliver?
Yeah.
For the 6
No,
minute-
well, actually, the one with the 6 scenarios, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you?
Do you have
I
that on
don't
slide?
have that on.
Oh, you don't have it.
Sorry.
All right.
We'll just get copies real quick.
Can we put it on the
Yeah.
thing?
Does that thing still work?
That thing's even work?
Well, you know what, just the one that's up there is fine.
Okay.
The
Will
table
this one
3.
work? Okay.
Yeah, my question is, what assumptions do you have built into the outlying years for the 4.9? Oh, no, that's. Oh, that's
4.1,
different.
4.5. The one you've got is outdated.
Yeah, okay.
That was a preliminary.
So you've already changed the assumption.
Yeah.
But I guess that you're assuming some kind of profile of rate increases from Met and the Water Authority to come up with those?
Why don't you go ahead and
Yes.
explain what the basis of them was?
Mike?
Mike?
I can explain that one, yeah. We use, Metropolitan Water District does do a long-term,
They do usually a 5-year.
longer than that, they have on their long-range financial plan. Water Authority will tell you it isn't worth anything because they never hit their targets, but that's the best information we have for the water. Works up to be about between 4 and 6%, depending on which year, of an increase for wholesale. And then the Water Authority, they did one a long time ago, but they don't update, they don't tell us what the next year is gonna be, so we have to use the best information we have. But those wholesale rate increases are between 4 and 6% each year. Yeah, and of course, the biggest ones in recent years is desal, and it's, like I said, 28%. This is, a 6.5% increase in face of a 28% on a commodity rate now, and then a little bit of that huge one goes next year as well, because it's only half a year.
Are there any other assumptions in those outlying, or are they predominantly the wholesalers' cost increases?
It's just a wholesaler's cost increase plus what we need to do to cover,
Some
and we do
escalation.
a 5-year detailed on the reserves, and like John was showing you where the reserves go, and so the assumption is what do we need to cover those?
There's escalation in rates and insurance, there's escalation factors.
Yeah, so you have
Yeah.
assumptions for labor
Oh, my
costs.
gosh, yeah, and
Absolutely.
they're on page, in fact, if you look on page of the budget, page 100 and, is that 10? 110.
Second to the last page.
There's just the significant assumptions on that page. This is the, we do 5 years detail and then another 5 years in summary, and then we put the assumptions there on page 110. So there are some assumptions there to where we come up with the.
Okay, well, just as a comment, I like this scenario because it has a bigger percentage increase in this proposed budget and then smaller ones in outlying years, and I think it matches well with the decel, philosophically with the decel coming online, and I think that's justifiable to the ratepayers, saying, look, we're gonna take a hit, there's a cost to reliability in this, and so.
It is 2 big years in a row because this is only half deliveries in this
No, I
fiscal year, and then we'll have
understand.
another big hit in the following year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I would like to say, I see the advantage to the 6.5 myself. I like it because I like that, I know we're just guessing, and we're taking a long view, and we don't even know where we're gonna be when we actually do it in July, much less what we're doing in 5 years. But I feel like I do not have a history or an understanding of it to be able to separate the discomfort of the moment from looking ahead to the long impact. And what I see on this particular one is we are dipping into our reserves, which is what they're there for, but we're not putting ourselves in great jeopardy. We're not, if this works out at table 3 and we can stay at the 4.5 as we move forward, I think that's realistic. I was at a meeting this morning, and I know Valley Center is just right off the bat, it's 10%. Another one was saying, well, we'll be 10 or more. I don't think even at 6.5, I don't think we will be more and on the high end of the rate increases, so I like that. I also have, I want to say I commend all of you and staff who did this, because I truly do believe, when I listen to other people, that our district is the district it is because we've really tried to work hard at being frugal and effective and use our money well. And if I have a great difficulty saying we're going to remove the employees' locker room, for example, and yet I'm going to be getting $50 a meeting more just to be sitting here. I just personally have difficulty with that. So I feel like that we should go with, trust our staff and the figures that are in front of us and go and say, this is as lean as we can get without starting to cut into one or the other. And I truly believe most people are gonna be unhappy if we have any raise at all because they're asking to conserve, but you've made a really good point. We're doing it because we want the reliability of that, and I think as this drought extends itself, we're going to see more and more and more how important it is that we as San Diego County have given that to us, and we need to pay for that. And I do like to know that our rates are in the lower third. I think that's amazing, and I think, you know, I would like to recommend that we continue to look at the other options as we've had a few, but I'm hoping we can have consensus to go with the 6.5. I'm just expressing an opinion on Dr. Martin. And I don't really feel it's the job of the policymakers to be deciding what should and shouldn't go. So if we're as lean as we can be, I think then we need to decide, the question is, how much of reserve do we want to go into now to feel comfortable, but down the road we'll get smacked again? Yes, now, Director Martin.
I think that's a good segue. I don't think it's up to us to make the decisions where the cuts need to be made. That's the general managers. We need to set policy on what the rate's gonna be and what percentage it's gonna increase. That's our job. So, in looking at that, I know there's no H2O weekly that tells us how we compare to other districts, because every district is completely different. So there's really no way to do that. I get it. I personally have no problem passing on a commodity rate to the folks, because they all understand water's more precious, water's more costly. I think where we can hold the line, and as an aside, I want to tell you that I've always been very proud of our vehicles. So the first truck today I wasn't very proud of. It's the dump truck. I know they're hard to keep clean, but this thing was like, really? It looked like the city owned it. So that's a put down enough. But I just had to mention that. I think this is a good first blush that staff did, going from the unbelievable 10% to the 6.5 more realistic. And I think, Dennis, you mentioned 2 positions already that you could possibly do without for next year that could be cut. And potentially there are others, I don't know what they are, it's not my job. But I think, unlike water districts, the special districts are different than every other budget put together. In my own business, when I have a budget, I have to budget on what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna take it in. This one, you just lay out the cost and say, so everybody pays this much. That's the way it is. Send out a 218, and that's tough. So you guys get to do that. But in any other business, you don't. You have to go, okay, you know, we're gonna have to make some cuts, and cuts are always difficult and tough to make. So I would personally recommend that Dennis and staff make some more cuts and get that number down as close to possible as a reasonable rate for increase. Not asking you to decrease the rate, but a reasonable increase for this year. Because that, to me, that number is just way out of line with the last 2 years. And it's not because of the water costs, because we're subsidizing that. I'm missing something. So there's other costs, and the only thing I can think of is employee costs, as it was brought up, but I don't know the answer. Not my job.
Any other comments?
That's my recommendation.
Right, so we've got one recommendation with that. Well, yes?
I think how probably more articulately said the exact same thing I was saying, so I would agree with his, if we're looking kind of for a consensus, I'm agreeable to what he was proposing.
So are you proposing a direct percentage, Hal?
No, I think whatever the
I'll just
general
look and see what I
manager,
can come up with.
Okay.
I'm not giving him one, he's the general manager, and he knows what he has to do. And to be honest, I would agree, though, that I think the men's bathroom is much more needed than our video screens and our makeup artists. So, if you can cut both of them, that's great, but it seems like one is pretty well needed for the employees.
Yeah, we might be able to cut the audio-visual and do the training room. That benefits the employees, not the boardroom. Cut the cost in half or something.
Yeah, boardroom, we don't need anything, we don't want, stars being made here. It's the
Okay.
system we have is great.
Director
I will cut
Elefant?
where I can.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of second that thought and say I'd rather defer this audiovisual project and do the locker room improvements in Building B. I think it's much more important.
Sure. Okay.
I think we've said that before earlier too, though.
We can just leave the blue lines.
Okay, would you like?
Get a gallon of paint.
I'll put a picture in there.
That would work too.
No, I appreciate that, and what
Do
I'll
you
do is I'll
feel
go
like
back and
you've got
look at,
directions?
I'll look at staffing, I'll look at, again, I'll look at the, and if you go, Director Snella, if you go to page, 109, it's the third from the last page. We were talking about how we had different reserve funds. You'll see the right chart there. You've got fund for water and sewer, you've got 110 and 120. So the 110 is replacement, so that comes from your operating revenue. The capacity on the right, the 120, that's future expansion. So you can see we're at a deficit of 16 million there already on that, just because we're paying back through the bond proceeds and everything else. And then you go to the right again, you've got 210 and 220, you've got replacement and capacity. So those are the only four funds that we've got for the district. So if it's a replacement of an asset, that basically comes from your ratepayer, because that's what you're doing, is you're asking the ratepayer to replace the facilities they use. So growth does not get tagged with replacement, and ratepayers don't get tagged with growth. That's why you've got four distinct funds. Those are the only funds we have. We don't have a quote-unquote general pool that we can move around. Everything we do has to be equated to these four funds. That's it. That's our choice. So that's what we were talking about when we say what funds we have in reserves, is you've got replacement, which comes out of operating costs / reserves, and then you've got new, which comes out of capacity fees or from development to build more capacity for the development. So those are the two choices.
Elefant.
Yeah, just a question on the use, in the range of use of reserves that we're looking at, that doesn't create any concerns whatsoever with the rating agencies?
I would, yes, I would
Yeah.
suggest we don't discuss that too much.
Yeah, we have to be careful
We
what
have
we
to be
discuss
careful what we
because
say
of the
about
SEC and the bonds going
Gotcha.
on, but it's, yeah, that's.
Yes, it is a dramatic
direct
concern.
impact.
Direct impact.
Director Martin.
So the next time we're gonna meet on this is when? June?
June
17th
17th,
is the,
So that's
What
the
we're
first,
projecting.
that's
That'll
the
be the-
first time you're gonna be able to present,
the final.
well, it won't be final. If we don't accept it, it's
Recommended.
not final.
It's gonna be a recommended from us.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we choose to reject it, are we under any legal obligation, Counselor?
Well, you need to adopt a budget. You need to,
But people have adopted budgets at least
Yeah.
before government's known
yeah,
for doing it.
yeah, but I mean, it's, that it's up to you, but it's more appropriate to get the budgets in place so that you can start on July
Right,
first.
but if we don't like those numbers, because we can't
Right,
talk
you're-
about
it's
it
up to
before
you.
then.
We
It's up to
we
you.
can have a special meeting after the 17th as well.
Yeah,
Okay, so I mean,
Yeah.
there are, I don't want to get caught in
Absolutely.
that corner of, you don't have any choice. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we do, but I just
Of
want to
Yeah,
make
what I'll
sure.
do is I'll come back and I'll look at wherever I can do what the board's directed me tonight, look at staff, if I can defer the proposed positions. I can tell you I don't have any positions that I can eliminate. We'll look at the operational costs, see if I can push any of these projects out. And again, I've got to look at it from the standpoint of what keeps the district safe. I'm not looking at the fact that I want to reduce my rates. I want to keep you from paying $1 million a day fine, something like that. So we'll be looking at that. So what we'll come back with on the 17th will be a recommended budget with, again, the highlights that have changed from today to then. So it will break down basically the differences in where we're at.
Well, just a thought, and I think maybe the board would be comfortable, is there a possibility for us, before you come with a final recommendation, would you be willing, and board, would you be interested in
Sure.
another workshop?
Sure.
Perhaps on the 8th of June? That's where we used to have our special meetings, because when we bring this forth at the board meeting, the final decision, it would be nice if we could complete it on the 17th.
Let me talk to these guys. They're the ones I gotta keep in here working on it and see if they can get this reviewed by then, and we'll reach out to you
All
with the
right.
date.
Would the 8th of June work for you gentlemen?
Not for me.
The 8th does not work. Okay, now that we judge. I'd just like to have you have some dates, so you'll know. The the 8th works for you?
Because you're gone
Well,
on that.
yeah, but I think
you're
all
gone.
five of
Right,
us
I
need to
know.
be here.
I'm going
Okay.
the
You're gone
first
too.
through
What
the
happens?
11th,
Yeah.
You go where?
First through the
I'm
11th.
gone, I'm out of town the first through the 11th.
First through the 11th. Ah, well, maybe you need to do it on the 15th.
I was gonna say 12th, 15th, 16th.
Mark?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
We'll shoot for the 15th if need be, then
The 15th.
you guys will just
If
be
we can do
working.
it, we can pencil it in for now, and you
Through the
let us
17th.
know.
Okay. Let's just pencil that in. Like I said, I gotta get back and go through this and see what we can beat up on the budget.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation, a lot of good questions, tough issue. Appreciate your time, everyone, and your thoughts. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.